Hey you guys, welcome back to Hyrule Park, where I am building a theme park based on The Legend of Zelda and Planet Coaster 2. In this video, we are doing something a little bit different than the other episodes in this series. By the way, this is episode 14, so if you haven't caught up with the series just yet, go back and check out some of the other episodes. There's some cool builds, if I do say so myself. But yeah, this build is actually a result of a contest that I had entered for theming up a coaster. It was put out by Benny on his Benji's Adventure channel. I don't actually know if his name is Benny or Benji. I don't know, he goes by both, I guess. Anyways, it was put out by Benny on that channel, and the idea is that he had created this coaster blueprint, bare bones, and the contest is to see, how you can take the coaster blueprint and theme it up the best you can, and kind of see who, I guess, is the best at theming. There are no rules other than we can't change the layout in any way. Everything else is fair game, unless I misinterpreted that, in which case, I guess I'm disqualified from the contest. Yeah, I won't be building the coaster layout myself this time around, but that's not to say this isn't a custom build. The video is centered completely around how I would theme an area from a blank slate using a coaster as the anchor point. So here I have the coaster blueprint placed. Everything else is on me to get this looking interesting, interactive, and that sort of thing. And also fitting in with Hyrule Park, which, yeah, I think was a challenge. The coaster kind of diehards out there are probably gonna maybe roast me for the coaster supports that I use. I don't know. I've mentioned this in the past. I'm not a big coaster guy in real life. I enjoy theme parks and the theming and the immersion of theme parks more so than the thrills of riding a coaster. So yeah, anyway, maybe the supports I use for this is not necessarily realistic for this type of a coaster. Again, I'm a noob when it comes to coasters and the engineering behind it. So I made the coaster supports work for this area that I needed to fill, and tried to be as realistic as possible with that in mind. But again, like if I were to turn on the actual coaster supports that the game gives you for this type of coaster, it would be like one of those wooden coasters where the supports are just super kind of like in your face and messy, and it just wouldn't have fit. So I wanted to do my own custom supports in a different style. But yeah, anyways, that's a long diatribe for defending my decision there. Going back to the build and kind of the idea of putting this here, I've had a thought of making a Rito Village themed area behind Hyrule Castle and next to Goron City for a little bit now. It just seemed like it would be a good fit because it would provide like a cool backdrop on the other side of Hyrule Castle, whereas I have Goron City's Death Mountain on one side, that rock structure of Rito Village will now be on the other side. So that's one point of reasoning for the location of this. The other one being the elevated landscape that kind of naturally comes with Rito Village seemed to pair nicely with the Goron City rocky terrain mountainous region. Essentially, it's allowing me to more seamlessly transition down from Goron City into a flatter terrain from Rito Village. It just is a more natural transition. And not to mention, in the future, I'm planning on building a Rito Valley inspired area too. So putting that behind this, so cutting through the back of this area of Rito Village in between Goron City, that area, I think it's going to make for a pretty easy transition terrain-wise to get to a Gerudo Valley area. Won't be as jarring going from just like flat terrain up to canyons, that sort of deal. Anyways, that's the genesis behind this build. I started working on it alongside my last episode's project, Sora's Domain, the entrance to that new area. If you haven't seen that, you should go check it out. It's pretty cool build. It was a good balance of two completely different architectural layouts in terms of Zora's Domain being more symmetrical, elegant, versus this one being more organic and kind of roughly laid out. It was interesting going back and forth between the two. In the end, this area of the park you'll see is not fully complete. Once we get to the end of the video, you'll probably see that it's close to 100% complete, but it's not quite there. You'll see with the final look in the coaster POV that there are parts of the guest path and plaza areas that maybe seem a bit bare. I get the foundation for that settled here, which is probably a good transition into what you're actually seeing on screen now that I've talked over the beginning of the footage. So in order to really get the Rito Village vibe in place for this area, there were two major things in my mind that I had to get down to have it be recognizable. The first being that big central stone structure that had started the area off. I think that's the most important and kind of the most iconic part of Rito Village in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. But the second being these Rito huts or houses or whatever you want to call them. These were super satisfying to make, by the way. They had no business coming together this easily, but it did. And maybe all that symmetry, rotation, utilization technique from Zora's Domain, because like I said, I was working on these kind of in tandem. Maybe those techniques came in handy with this part. I don't know, but I'm pretty happy with the result. This first one here, I had an idea of making it into sort of like a restaurant, or maybe more so like a food court. So this building is a bit wider of a structure than the upcoming ones. Those narrower variations I'll place around the park and kind of interacting with the coaster and whatnot. This larger one gave me a blueprint, so to speak, for creating the other variations of this scattered throughout the plaza and, like I said, around the coaster track. And apologies, but I did skip over the beginning path strategy for this area earlier. I wanted to kind of make this different than the other builds I've had so far. Maybe Kokiri Forest and the coaster interaction there is the closest I came to this type of coaster path interaction. But yeah, I definitely saw a need to have the coaster really interact with the path system here. It just seemed like a good spot for it because, there's a lot of elevation increases in Rito Village in the Zelda games. I'm not necessarily able to replicate and keep things grounded in the sort of realism that I'm trying to keep it grounded in terms of, what a real park can construct in real life. So yeah, using the coaster interaction along with some of the other perspective tricks that I use with the terrain and the rockwork and whatnot, my hope was that I could give the effect that you were high above the ground below when walking around the village. I also needed this area to be pretty compact. I didn't want this to end up like a sprawling area similar to how I planned to make Zora's Domain. So yeah, having a coaster of this size, I needed to really have that path interaction with how everything needed to fit in this compact footprint that I had set aside. So I realize a lot of this won't even be visible from the coaster POV in terms of like what I'm showing right now, but this is the park project, so obviously I want to include a lot or all of this because that's what I'm doing. I'm creating an immersive theme park, not just a series for coaster layouts. Even if I wasn't doing that type of a series, it still creates the immersion to have this type of stuff in with a coaster. So while yes, the main subject of this episode is the coaster itself and the theming around the coaster, it's really, I want this to be how can I incorporate an entire area within like a flagship ride, so to speak, that being the coaster. In the intention here is that I'm hoping to have this feel as if it's a lived-in village. So with guests milling around, these marketplace decorations and the planters that I put down, everything should be sort of presented in a way that this is a community in this area of the park. And in that way, I guess it's sort of like a castle town area in the mountains. That's sort of the vibe I'm trying to go for anyway. And then here are the more narrow versions of the Rito huts. These are more fitting for the ones like hanging from the rocks, the boulders, those overhangs and whatnot, and also pretty perfect for housing like little shops or stands around the village too. It's a pretty signature look that was obviously necessary to include for any sort of Rito Village inspired area for sure. But when I said in the beginning of the episode that the area was more or less complete, it just was not quite 100% complete, at least in my mind. Part of that incomplete grade that I gave myself with this was due to these huts though. So like the structure and the theme and the feel of them are there, but I think I need to vary them up just a bit more than I have here. I have a couple different color variations, but if I think back to the game and playing through it, I don't think every single one of these had the exact same shape and sort of detail to it. I'd have to go back and look, I guess, but I think either way, I think I'd want to have another variant or two within the footprint just so things don't become too samey, I also remember these platform things off the backs of the hanging huts that you can jump from, and they, I guess, presumably served as sort of like a platform for the Ritos to take off from. So little details like that I'm hoping add to the immersion and the authenticity of the build. And one of the most subtle additions, and also one of my favorite additions to the area, are these banners. Like I was saying earlier, part of making it seem like you were high up in the mountain-like region of the park without actually building real mountains and terraforming real mountains was creating perspectives or adding subtle elements to play into that intention. So adding these banners around, they're really the only thing that actively blow in the wind within the game outside of like some of the plants and trees. And I used them in the Goron coaster a while back, and I love how they added a bit of like kinetic energy to everything, really subtle, but just enough to get that effect, And again, trying to simulate being at a higher elevation, having things like blowing in the wind that you'd expect to be there when you're high up was a good touch to add, I think. Then getting to the coaster station, I was really not sure at all how I was going to incorporate this boarding station into the village and make it seem like it belonged there. I knew those Rito Huts were probably not going to work for the station due to the, it's a elongated like rectangular shape. I thought maybe having one of them at both the exit and the entrance of the boarding station, that might be an option, but in the end that didn't really sit well with me. I felt like I would have at that point just been plopping down assets just to fill space, and this one here that I'm building just feels a bit more intentional. And the thing about this though is that since I custom build the shingles and the tile things on there myself, it really drives the piece count up a ton. Like I think this roof alone had something like 3,000 pieces to it when I finish it. And for anyone who doesn't play Planet Coaster and isn't familiar with the blueprints and the system there, essentially a blueprint is you create something, you can highlight the creation and then save it as a blueprint to share both in the online workshop or just save it as a draft that you can grab from later within your library. But the catch is it has to be within a certain piece count to be able to save it as a blueprint. I believe that piece count is 8,000 pieces, if I'm not mistaken. So knowing that and going back to the fact that this was going to be a part of a contest submission, I had to do a more simple roof for that boarding station for the submission. Again, that's just the coaster submission contest. This one I did keep the more custom detailed roof. But yeah, in order to enter that contest, I had to include the blueprint of the theme coaster, right? So I had to keep it within 8,000 pieces. So having a 3,000 piece roof just for a boarding station was a lot to take up the piece count and would have left a lot less detail available for other areas. So that's why I went with the more simple generic roof for that submission. But again, for Hyrule Park, I don't need to necessarily abide by that piece count limit. I can keep it detailed and keep this custom one. That's just a bit more interesting than the generic one I had to use for the contest. And that's probably, now that I'm saying that, it's probably a big reason why I feel this area is empty. And it's not even empty. I think there's a lot going on. I just think it's incomplete. But I think that might be why, is because, I was really trying to be conscious of the piece count and keep it within the limit that I had available for the contest submission when I was building this. And then the other piece of that is kind of related to what you're seeing here. Terraforming the terrain doesn't save within a blueprint. So I had to keep that in mind as well. So for this contest submission, I again need to simulate the high up in the mountains thing. That's the whole point of this build in this area, right? So I had to use a lot of the boulders at like max size to kind of create my own rockwork rather than being able to rely on just raising and terraforming the terrain to fit the elevation and then kind of painting it as rock like I've done in other areas of Hyrule Park. But yeah, I wasn't able to do that with this build because I was submitting it to that contest, and I actually end up liking it a lot better than I think if I had terraformed, because I think these rocks kind of fit more the Rito vibe than just terraforming and trying to paint it to the right color. So yeah, like I said, this is a little bit of a different build than the other episodes in that I have some restrictions in place that I need to be able to fit the build to be able to enter this into that contest. But overall, this is the vision I had for a finished Rito area. I think it just forced me to be a bit more efficient, which is probably a good thing for future builds too. I imagine for the final park version, whenever that comes to be, I'm sure far down the road, because this is a pretty big project and I think we're maybe not even halfway through it if I'm being honest. But yeah, in that final version of the park, I'll have updated this village to fit a more detailed version, and for sure we'll show that off. If not in an upcoming episode, then like I said, the final kind of walkthrough of this park when it's all said and done. And then just adding a couple of these green plants here to give a little bit more detail to sort of the rock work, so it's not just plain rock work. Thought it added a nice little touch for the mountain vibe that we're kind of going for. And then even though I couldn't quite get the same elevation and height on some of the guest pass to keep that realism intact, I still did want to have that Rito Village wooden stairway that sort of wraps around this rock structure. And I wish this rock structure had like some sort of name that I could call it in game. I don't think it does. Something other than rock structure would be nice, but I don't know. Maybe rock spire. Maybe I'll go with that from now on. But anyways, yeah, I needed to have that stairway represented in some way to be an accurate representation of Rito Village. So I thought it could be cool to have it as like a decorative theming element that adds that feeling of height just a bit more too. The problem I had after putting this up though was the supports that I created for it. They came right down to the guest plaza pathway below, so I had to kind of come up with a way not to make it so messy down there and have those kind of muddying up the plaza. Alright, so I debated whether or not to actually include this footage of the Rito statue animatronic thing I'm attempting here. I don't know how I feel about the end result, that's why. I ended up using this concept art image that I found to basically try and trace it with some simple art shapes in the game. You know, typically I just go off of a screenshot or a visual memory of an in-game version of whatever animatronic I'm building. But this one felt a bit more complicated than the other ones that I've done so far, so it was sort of intimidating to kind of just go bare bones, so to speak. You know, like I mentioned in the Zora episode last week, the source material of this area, much like the Zora area, is from the newest installments in the Zelda series, so a lot more detail involved in the character models in those games than say like the sculptulas I did from Ocarina of Time or the pose, those things that I incorporated into the Forest Temple Dark Ride. So to make it a little easier on myself and a little less intimidating, I went with this strategy, just sort of overlaying my build on top of a source image. The trial and error that goes into these animatronic attempts are sort of overwhelming at times, and the amount of pieces you sort of have to stack together in weird ways, this just mitigated some of the guesswork for me, but it was still a lot. I cut out a lot of the trial and error stuff with this particular Rito animatronic build. Like I said, I'm not sure I'm entirely satisfied with the end result, but from afar it gets the point across, I think. In a game like Planet Coaster, where we don't necessarily have anything by way of like character animatronic model building, at least in terms of creating our own custom ones, I think this is about as close as I can get to it. Just maybe I can clean it up a bit more. In this part of the coaster, I feel like to this point we've done a lot of stuff around the coaster itself, but this section is actually theming the coaster track. So I wanted to, for this section of the coaster, to represent Kenali's flight training, that mini game that I think is in Tears of the Kingdom, could be Breath of the Wild. I'm not totally sure. It's been a while since I played those games, which one it's actually in. Maybe it's both. But yeah, I thought it could be a cool element to have towards the end here, off towards the edge border of Rito Village, you know? So trying to represent that platform dock sort of situation where you start the minigame as Link in that game. That's what I'm doing here. And then I get to the diving minigame action part of the mission, I guess, here in a second. In this part of the coaster, Benny had made it as a block break section too, so in the case that the coaster gets held up here for any reason, I thought this would be a pretty cool spot to take in for those riders waiting for the coaster to start back up. So that's another reason why I wanted to theme up this spot as that scene or minigame. It felt apropos. And then again, these banners coming in handy to add that kinetic energy to different scenes of the coaster. I love these little guys. So if anyone's familiar with the Kenali flight training minigame, there are these gusts of upward like wind tunnel things that help Link gain altitude using his hand glider or paraglider, whatever you want to call it. So that's what I'm trying to recreate here. I'm using actually the rapid foam effect that I used in the rushing water in the terraforming part of the video, and just making it go upward in the sky. I thought it pulled the look off pretty well for the most part. The only downside is I wasn't really able to hide the actual piece the effect comes out of, so we need to sort of suspend realism for that piece of the scene, but otherwise I think it works pretty well. Then the other part of that minigame were the rings that you have to float through as Link. So there are these like floating kite type rings scattered throughout the course that Link has to go through in order to get points to get whatever the prize is at the end of the game. So another thing maybe we should suspend realism for, if you don't mind, because I didn't create like anything that appears to be tethering down the kite things, but I guess pretend there's a really thin string material holding these things down to the ground, right? Or maybe we can just say that the effects piece that is shooting out the rapids foam into the sky are actually there to tether down the kites. Maybe we can just say that. There we go. Both things kind of taken care of there. Realism acquired. Then the last piece of this scene is Kenali's hut. So going back to the Rito Hut starting point to create this, just making it a bit more of a square shaped structure rather than the more circular shape of those narrow huts that I showed in the start of the video. So yeah, this is actually an example of a variant I should probably use more throughout the plaza, honestly, to put like shops or food stalls inside to get that variety in the village that I was saying I want more of. So future Biko, note that. Swap out circle-shaped huts for this square-shaped hut in certain spots. Thanks, man. Alright, so coming to the end of the build footage here. Thanks for getting this far in the video if you're still here. If you're a time skipper, then welcome. And sorry if this video is a little bit different of a build than what I typically have done to this point in the series. I don't see myself using any other blueprints of anything this large in the park again. I typically try to make every single inch of the park myself, but when I saw the contest news that Benji put out in and I knew that I had this Rito Village area kind of in the queue for the park, I figured it would be a cool opportunity to give it a shot in both ways. And since I don't have a ton of free time to play this game and record voiceover and edit videos as it is with 3 small children running around and a full-time job, yeah, I figured feeding 2 birds with 1 scone was the way to go, if you know what I mean. So yeah, hopefully you guys like this one. Let me know what you think in the comments. Leave a like, subscribe, do all of the things that help these videos get out to the world. I would very much appreciate it. Next episode, I imagine we'll be back in Zora's Domain, unless another idea comes to mind in between this sentence and the next video. That's always a possibility, but as of now, I think we'll go back to Zora Land and build that area out. All right, I'll leave you guys to watch me pretend I'm an engineer and build custom supports for the coaster, like I mentioned back at the start of the video. Then after that, we'll jump into the POV. Cool. Thanks guys again for watching and for the support. I really do appreciate it. Hope to see you guys all in the next one. Bye-bye.